Bobby Marks, NBA front office expert, capologist, ESPN, joining us here on the show. We're going to get you kind of some of the Joe Lacob sound from the TK pod as we talk it out with Bobby. Hey, Bobby, thanks for coming on. How are you?
I'm good, guys. How are you?
We're doing fantastic. I tell you what, before we play the Joe Lacob sound for everybody, because he kind of referenced the tax apron, could you give us this? What do you think Klay Thompson is worth on the open market right now, and what makes sense for the Warriors if they get to that conversation?
Probably what makes sense is probably what he was offered, I guess, in an extension, in that probably that $25 to $30 million range. I don't see anything more. He's not a max player at this stage of his career. You look at, so for me, I think it's, anywhere between 25 and 30, probably maybe a little bit north where Draymond came in. But you get concerned as far as multiple years, past two. So for me, it's probably in that $25 million range, because you look at it, it's like, okay, if it's not Golden State, then who is it, right? You go a little bit of a process of elimination as far as teams that have significant cap space, and really the teams that have it, that are playoff teams. He could certainly want to go to a rebuild. Detroit would be one of them, but would be potentially Oklahoma City and potentially a team like Philadelphia.
And if you look at the Warriors situation, then assuming that the Chris Paul $30 million comes off the books and Joe Lacob's desire to reduce payroll, can they really pay Klay Thompson that $25 to $30 million a year amount and still stay under that luxury tax threshold?
It'll be tight. It'll be really tight. You've got about $137 million in guaranteed contracts right now. That doesn't include, Looney's got a partial guarantee there. And the luxury tax 171. You do the math, you add 25, and then you fill out your roster. You'll be probably right at the tax. You will be probably below the apron, which is certainly the goal. But yeah, it's a challenge as far as staying under the tax. I I heard as far as being a repeater tax team, which they are, and you're paying a significant amount of money and everything. But you're going to have hard decisions. You're going to have hard decisions with as you said, the Chris Paul contract. You're going to have hard decisions if you have to choose between Wiggins and Klay. You have hard decisions as far as what Klay's number is going to be. Because eventually, next year, Kuminga's, number would come in because he's extension eligible this offseason here. And Steph's extension eligible too. You could add another year onto his contract here. So, yeah, it's doable, but it's going to be extremely tough as far as getting under that 171 number if that's what the goal is.
And Bobby, since you referenced it twice, we want to play for our audience what Joe Lacob did recently say on the TK pod. Here it is.
Can you say you were going to be out of the second apron going into the going into next season? You will not be in the second apron?
I'll go beyond that. I'll tell you that our, plan 1 or 1A is actually we'd like to be out of the tax. And we think we have a way to do that. That kind of is the plan, not just under the second apron. And I'll tell you why that's important. Because the truth is that we need to be out of the tax 2 years out of the next 4 in order, or below the tax line, in order to get this repeater thing off our books. We don't want to be a repeater. It's just so prohibitive. Not to say we wouldn't do it if we had to, but you've got to look at what the downside is to doing that. So that's the plan, is to try to do that. And we think we can keep our team together and retain even the players we might be able to bring players back at different numbers and so on. So that's kind of plan A, but there's a plan 1B, I guess, or probably 1A. And 1B is, we could go even further than that. And we could make big changes if we had to. If this team, were to go slide all the way down here and not do well at the end of the year, there's going to be big changes. But if we do really well, we might decide to go the other way. So everything's open. We have to be flexible. I can just tell you that the goal is to not be a lottery team ever. The goal is to be competitive. The goal is to win. And ideally, if it's possible, to win championships or compete for championships.
So here's my question for you, Bobby, especially with the way you referenced it. And Bobby Marks, ESPN, with us. When Joe talks about getting under the apron, in listening to you, you make it sound like it's possible, but at the same time, it doesn't necessarily give them any flexibility to improve. Is that accurate? What kind of flexibility would they have?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two different things. He referenced the luxury tax, which is projected to be at 171, and then we have the aprons here, right? So the first apron is like 179, and the second one is going to be at 189. So listen, if you're in the second apron, you better like your roster. I mean, you better like your roster because you won't be able to add outside of guys on the veteran minimum, and it's extremely, extremely challenging to trade for players. It's basically dollar for dollar, and you can't aggregate. What he's referenced as far as with the luxury tax is that, yeah, I mean, this team is a repeater tax team, which means they've been in the tax at least 4 years. Their luxury tax bill is 180 million plus, and then you add salary, 200 million. So you're paying 380 for a playing team right now. That's not justifiable. It just really isn't. I mean, unless you just want to continually spend. The hard thing, what Joe's probably looking at too, is that when we get to 2025, so not this offseason, the following, these luxury tax penalties become more significant. Instead of having a $180 million tax penalty, it could be $300 million, or it could be $350 million, because it's more punitive as far as the tax rates are going to be here. But yeah, I mean, listen, everything is, as you said, everything's on the table. Where you are right now in the standings, and you're fighting to get in. I think they will. You're looking at the 9-10, and then you got to win 2 to get it to face probably Minnesota or Oklahoma City, and maybe you get a run in you, and things change a little bit here. But the reality probably is that, as he said, you're probably going to have to make some hard decisions, and you probably have a placeholder as far as where you see Klay's numbers going to be, and then as far as and maybe what you see with Wiggins is going to be, but as you guys you're fully aware, then what's the message it sends to Curry, right? What is the message send to Steph Curry that your final 2 years of your contract here, or maybe it'll be even longer, that it's going to be a little bit of a step back. It's going to be a little bit of a youth movement here, and we're going to rely on Kuminga and Brandon. We'll still have Draymond, and we'll see what happens with what happens with Wiggins, and maybe he can turn into something like that. So everything's doable, but as he said, yeah, there's going to be some hard decisions.
Is it at all doable to go big game hunting in terms of some of the bigger names that might be available in the offseason? I don't want to put names to it because then people go crazy, but to add a player who's 45 or 50 million, what would that mean in terms of subtracting from this roster going into next season?
Yeah, I mean, what's happening with these rules when we get into the offseason starting in April. So if you're a first or second apron team, if you're one of these teams, not a luxury tax, a first or second apron. So if you've got salary over $78, $79 million, everything is dollar for dollar. So if you want to go out and get, I'm just throwing in Trae Young, for example, right? You want to go out and get Trae Young or Donovan Mitchell, then you got to trade a $40 million player. It's got to match up. There's no more percentages. It's not 125 or 10%. So you've got to match up. You got to find a salary on your roster and to do that. So you can't combine. If you're a second apron team, if you're one of these teams out, high spending, you can't combine Wiggins and Chris Paul to go get a $50 million player. Those days are over here. So that becomes more challenging for where Golden State is with their salaries here to go out, and if that all-star became available, you've got the picks. It's not an issue of the picks or maybe even your younger players. It's just a matter of salaries matching up because of where these rules are right now.
Bobby, if there is a Kuminga extension in the offseason, what does that contract look like?
Probably what you're looking at, probably in Minnesota with Jaden McDaniels. I mean, he got 5 for 131. You're probably looking at $30 million per. I think certainly what his role is going to be moving forward, what his role is right now as a starter, he's only going to get better. As my colleague Brian Windhurst calls it, he's not going to get a max, but it's the fun max, right? It's the first contract. It's the first extension here. It's not, the second or third contract. It's basically buying stock in something, and hopefully it exceeds the expectations here. But you're probably looking at him in that $30 million range.
You're listening to 95.7 The Game, KGMZ FM and HD1 San Francisco, always live on the free Odyssey app, Twitch, and YouTube, powered by First NorCal Credit Union.
Jordan Poole got turned into Chris Paul, and he's making 30 this year, and next year I know is not fully guaranteed. Is there any way that the Warriors can turn Chris Paul's salary spot into something in the open market in the offseason?
You can. It's just a matter of how much salary do you want to bring back. The challenge becomes is that because Chris's contract is non-guaranteed, you're not trading a $30 million player unless you guarantee some of that money. So if you want to go out and get a $30 million player, you have to basically guarantee, basically all of it here. So it's basically what Phoenix went through. Phoenix went through last year when they traded him to the Wizards in the Beal deal, and they had to guarantee the contract here. So yeah, I mean, you could definitely flip that again. It's just a matter of how much more salary are you willing to take back.
Bobby Marks, ESPN, NBA capologist, front office talker, joining us here. Willard and Dibs, 95.7 The Game. Bobby, what about the? Can we go back to Klay for a second?
Sure.
25 to 30 million. There's another team out there that would offer him that?
It's hard for me to see it, unless it's like, Orlando, who, maybe, feels, they need shooting down there and are willing to come in and maybe give you a 1 year, $30 million type deal, something like that. It's hard for me to see a team going out and committing 3 years, $75 million for Klay Thompson. It really is. And he's been up and down. We all know what's going on coming off the bench. He was great in Utah before the All-Star break here. But as the salaries are these days, you basically have two max guys, and then your next guy is in that $20 to $25 million range. I mean, it's basically trying to do a puzzle, and that's kind of where he would fit in.
Yeah. So, but if another team wouldn't offer it to him, then why would the Warriors have to pay him that?
Yeah, I mean it's a good point. I mean, you don't have to do anything. You can maybe let him go out and let the market dictate it. He's not a restricted free agent. You don't have the right to match anything. You can certainly put something on the table before June 30th as far as an extension here, or you can let him go out and shop. And the one thing you don't want him to do is leave. It leaves for nothing. It all it does is, it ensures you basically that you'll be under the luxury tax.
When you look at the Andrew Wiggins contract now, a year or two after the Warriors signed him to that extension, what does the league think of him as a player, and how valuable does he become based on his relative amount on the salary cap? Yeah, I mean, the guys, as I said, the guys in that 20, and he's a little bit north of that, the guys in that $20 million range are value. I know he's been up and down. He has played better. He's got three for 85 left after this year. If you ever had to dump him, you definitely could. I think where Golden State caught a break, and I was talking to a couple of teams about it. The Jordan Poole contract, which I thought at the time was a good value deal, you get a lot of teams talking as one of the worst contracts in the NBA right now, based on his production in Washington. So you caught a break there as far as flipping that, because if you had been stuck with that, then you would be heading to purgatory as far as from a cap standpoint.
Bobby, your understanding of this whole picture, and then add in your basketball acumen. I want to throw a phrase at you, and you tell me what it means to you, because we say this and hear it in the Bay Area all the time. Maximizing the remainder of Steph Curry's career. Yeah. What does that mean to you? What does that look like for the Warriors?
I mean, what it means is that you have to keep the checkbook open. I mean, that's and it's kind of similar to what's going to happen in LA with LeBron. The reality is that you might just be at a point where maybe you're not good enough compared to some of these Western Conference teams here, and this is kind of who you are, in that you're hoping that the young kids take a big step here, but. As far as maximizing, can you pull another rabbit out of the hat from a couple of years ago when you won a championship? I mean, that's probably that's what you probably, do you have another run in with this group if you do re-sign Klay and your two young players take a huge step here and you get Wiggins back from 2 years ago? So, yeah, I mean, what you want to do, yeah, you're trying to after this year, he's got 2 years left. He's still playing at a high level. You're trying to do everything, and it's going to be interesting here. Is if you start cutting corners from a salary standpoint to devalue the product on the roster, what does that send to your best player?
Yeah, it's a message that fans don't want to see sent. You mentioned LeBron James, and he's got a player option for next year. What do you think the chances are of him taking his talents, maybe not to South Beach, but elsewhere in hopes of maybe uniting with his son who comes out early?
It's going to be fascinating. You know, I mean, yeah, his son is, would be draft eligible if he declares, would a team, if a team was like Philadelphia, for example, if they're picking in the 20s, would they pick him thinking they have a chance of getting LeBron? He's got a $51 million player option. I think if LeBron ever raised his hand and said, I want out and I want to go somewhere else, whether it be in a trade or, going into free agency to go play with his son, I think that would certainly be, be on the table here. But, as you guys have seen, you'll see them tomorrow night, they're no closer to a championship. And they played better, but they're nowhere near where, Denver is and some of these younger teams. And that's the beauty of the Western Conference, is that all you have to do is get into the playoffs, because you're going to get probably Minnesota or OKC, teams that, have not been there before. You get if you're Golden State, you get OKC in round one. I'd like your chances there.
Any chance LeBron ends up on the Warriors next year, Bobby?
It was a fun story, and I think, there's certainly merit to it. And I think, when you go through the trade deadline and he's tweeting out emojis of hourglasses, you definitely have to put the call in there. I just don't listen. If you wanted to come there for the veteran minimum, I mean, you can do that. If he wants to play with, a sign and trade would be extremely, extremely challenging. Him opting into his contract, who knows?